Today I want to talk a little bit about working with my Leica M9, what I've been doing the last couple of months, services that I've just had done to my M9, and where I think this all fits into going into 2026. So as many of you know, I've been working with Leica cameras off and on now for decades. My M3s belong to my great uncle who purchased them in the 50s, and I've owned virtually every Leica camera system or have worked with every 35 Leica camera system from the M3s on. Recently, I've been playing a lot with my students who own M11Ps. Wonderful camera, a very expensive camera, but a wonderful camera. But I still had this very strong affinity for wanting an M9. There's something about the Kodak color science, about the simpler menu systems and everything in this camera that really resonates with the way that I like to work. I consider the M9 and the M8 and the M8.2 to really be transitional cameras. This is the very first full frame digital camera that Leica ever produced. And in that, it has a wonderful simplicity that I don't see in later cameras. The menu system, the interface, everything is just very straightforward. It's something that us as film photographers dedicated 100% back in that day would really appreciate because it was an easier move over. The new digital cameras, it doesn't really matter who makes it, in my opinion, are just too menu heavy dependent. There's just too many things you have to set up, too many buttons, too many touchscreens. I like the simplicity of an M9. It's just easy to work with. But the M9 had a critical flaw, and the critical flaw was the glass that covered the sensor. Now, you'll hear people talk about sensor rot, that the M9 could suffer from sensor rot. It wasn't the sensor itself. The sensor itself is fine. It was the glass that covers the sensor. And that glass had a coating on it, and the coating, when scratched or when exposed to a lot of humidity, could start to corrode. This was a problem that Leica figured out pretty early on, and they started offering a free service at the time to replace that sensor glass with one that would not, or should not at least, ever have a problem. I think that the culprit for most of that sensor rot was it was an early on camera. We were still trying to figure things out. Leica was still figuring out coding, still figuring out how they were going to make this digital M body. I think that at that time, those of you that remember having digital cameras, we cleaned our sensors a lot more than maybe we should have. You know, trying to keep that sensor clean, keep the dust off and all that kind of stuff. That's a lot of liquid that was going into the camera at that time. Additionally, if you were cleaning and you were applying maybe a little too much pressure, you could have potentially scratched that coating. I think it's all of these factors together that created the sensor rot issue, or in reality, the glass rot issue. So now in 2025, I reached out to the folks at Kolari Vision. They're in New Jersey. By the way, everything that I'm talking about, I paid for. I got no discounts, no special services, anything, totally out of my own pocket. I decided to reach out to Colari and see if it was possible for them to fix my Leica M9. Now, I tested my M9 and only at f-stops like 16 and beyond. I work a lot with pinhole lens systems on the camera that have like f64, f90, f128, and if there's any issue on a sensor, believe me, you will see it at f128. And I noticed that I had what I would refer to as early onset sensor glass corrosion. It wasn't a lot, but it was in a few places, and I have a lot of shooting planned for this camera over the next couple of years in a lot of different types of environments. And I figured, well, why not? Let's send the camera in and let's have it fixed. So let me tell you what I did. I packaged the camera up, sent it to Colari. They confirmed that yes, there was early onset sensor glass corrosion. And I decided to replace the sensor glass. Now, Colari gives you two options. Option number one is BG31 glass. Option number two is BG61 glass. The 61, these are both made by Schott, German, wonderful glass manufacturer. The BG61 is the one that I chose to go with for a couple of reasons. One, the thickness and everything exactly matches the original glass that was in the M9. Additionally, the spectral sensitivity, the transmission of light, everything is almost identical to the original M9. So my color fidelity and everything would be the same. The 31 varies a little tiny bit in terms of the way the light is being and the colors are being transmitted. Also, the thing that I liked about the 61 is that it's double coated. So basically, it's warranted against ever having that sensor glass corrosion again in the future. I don't have to worry about it. Whereas if the 31, it is possible that it still could have that problem. Now, it cost a few $100s more to upgrade to the 61 glass, but I'm only planning on doing this once, so I decided to do that. Additionally, on the rear screen, There were two different versions of this that were made. The original rear screen that came on the M9 was kind of a plastic material. And a lot of us would put coating or covers over that, like from cell phones and stuff, to keep it from getting scratched. And it would get scratched. On the M9P and on my original monochrome, both of those had the sapphire glass. The sapphire glass is like the best. It was absolutely the best. The people at Colari will tell you it's the best. But that's only offered through Leica. So what I ended up doing was using their new glass on the back, and it's made of quartz. It's really durable, not as durable as the sapphire, but close enough for my work. So, and the third thing that I had them do when it was in for a service was I had them just do a quick make sure that it didn't need a CLA, that the lubricants looked good, that everything looked good on the inside, and I got the big thumbs up. The camera was CLA'd by Leica like in 2017. I just wanted to make sure that I was good to go going forward in the future. So I kind of feel like going into 2026, I'm really in the perfect spot. My camera's got everything about it that's working perfectly. B&H sells new batteries that are exact match to this camera. They're kind of expensive, but I'm getting multiple days worth of shooting, and I'm loving everything that I'm seeing. In the future here, probably once a month or so, I'm going to start posting some videos comparing the color and the dynamic range and everything of this camera to more modern cameras. So one of the logical first selections will be something like the new M11P. I'll use the same lens between the two cameras. We'll take a look at it, and we'll look at, what do we see in the color? Because what I've been noticing in the color, the difference between, say, the M9 color and the new 10s and the 11s and all those, is that this has more of a film-like color. I'm not saying it's more accurate. It's more film-like, and I think that's really important. I mean, Kodak, did the color science, designed the sensor setup in here, and it looks more like film to me than modern digital cameras. Modern digital cameras like the 11 are wicked accurate. I mean, I'm looking at the color balance and everything, and it's beautiful. The fact that you can prevent it from doing highlight clipping is amazing, but the color is very, what I would call, realistic. And that's not really for me. Film color isn't necessarily realistic as it is emotional. It has a particular quality to it. We all use different film stocks for a particular color rendering. I feel like the M9 has its own unique color rendering, and that's something that I'm kind of missing in other digital cameras. Now, yes, of course, you could add that rendering in post, and that's fine. And of course, I work on my files in post as well, but I just like how the images come out of this camera better. So overall, if you own an M9 and you're looking to have it be a camera that you can use going forward for years down the road, consider sending it in and having somebody looking at it. I know Colari can also replace the shutters. They can do all sorts of stuff. I believe there are 2 other places in the world that'll do that type of full comprehensive service. If anybody knows a place that does that provides a real warranty, please add it in the comments. So in addition to the M9, they also will service the monochrome, the first monochrome. And these cameras have become kind of culty and kind of expensive the last couple months. As I said, I got my camera for a really great deal. And even with the service that I put into it, it's a fraction of what it would cost for me to buy like an M11. Some people have been asking me my thoughts on the new M11 versus the M9 and why I would want one over the other. If you're a high ISO shooter, like you really need like ISO 6400 and above, then yeah, the M11P makes an awful lot of sense. But I don't. I mean, this camera to me, as I said, once again, it's more like a film camera. It's that transitional digital camera. 160, 400, 800, the standard film speeds that I would work at, all look really good. I don't expect 3200 to look good in this camera. It doesn't look great in film. It doesn't look great in this camera for sure. So another question I get asked a lot is the resolution, is the 18 megapixels of my M9 good enough for 2025 and 2026? And my answer is absolutely. Technology and Photoshop and the way we work with these cameras. I mean, when these cameras first came out, those of you that remember during that time period, workflow and all that was very proprietary. It was kind of the Wild West in early digital. No one really knew how everything was playing, how ICC was going to work from camera to monitor to printer. It took time for digital to evolve. If you look at magazines from this time period and before, digital was touting that it's here, it's the best, and there's no more need for film. But the reality is it really took another decade plus for digital to really be in a really strong place alongside film. But taking a camera like my M9 and putting it into 2025 technology, 2025 Photoshop, using all those years of better workflow development, I'm able to get things out of this camera today that I couldn't have back when it first came out. So I think that's a really exciting way that this technology is going into the future. So the resolution is plenty, especially with options like super resolution and the raw editing platform. I mean, it just creates an enormously beautiful file that still, as I said, feels more 35 millimeter film-like. And that's an important thing. 60 megapixels in the M11 or the Sony's or whatever looks nothing like 35 millimeter film. If you're trying to emulate that look of 35 or some reportage work that you like, the resolution is so high, it's so biting, it's so much micro clarity that it really doesn't look like 35 millimeter film. It looks more like medium format film, bordering on large format film. 40 megapixels really feels to my eye like medium format. 24, 18, that felt like 35. It's what you would expect from a 35 millimeter image to be printed. And that's one of the things that I really like about this camera. I'm using this camera because that's the look that I want. Cool part, of course, about a camera like the M11P is it's kind of like having 3 cameras in one. I mean, depending upon the resolution that you choose, you can have a very different looking output in terms of the image quality. Few things also about the Kolari service, and I found this to be a little difficult on their website sometimes to understand. Not all M9s upgrade to the new glass easily. You have to look at your sensor ID number. If you have a very early one, anything under 10, those can have a little bit more of an issue. They're a little harder to get the glass off. Not to say that it can't, I'm not speaking for Colari, but in phone conversations they were saying that the very early sensors were a little more difficult. And that some of the early sensors, a very tiny proportion of them, even when the glass is upgraded, there can be problems now with the sensor itself. Specifically like a Model 3s and 6s and stuff like that. Mine happened to be an 11. 11 and above seems to be absolutely spot on. And if you happen to be lucky enough to have a 15 or 16 sensor ID, you should be good to go because that was the last ones that Leica produced. And by all accounts, even today, they're working perfectly. Anything else on the sensor? I don't think so. The upgrade and everything that I did, I feel really comfortable with. I feel like I've created my M9 now that can go into 2026 and 27 and 28 and really be that valuable friend that I always used to carry with me to make my works. I plan on using this camera side by side with my film cameras. I'm once again am very much that hybrid shooter who enjoys working with both. I've also seen a lot of people recently talking about how 2026 is going to be the year of analog. The analog is here. Now look, I'm a total analog junkie. I play nothing but vinyl records in my studio and in the house. I enjoy film. I love film. But I actually see 2026 in a different way. I see 2026 in the light of digital technology has matured enough in 2026. This is just before AI happens, that what you can do with a digital cinema camera, what you can do with a digital camera, or even an older digital camera using new technology is really amazing. And the fact that we have all these great films still on the market, going into 2026 is incredible. The last decade plus has been difficult, but film has come out in such a great way on the other end. So I really see 2026 as being the year of the hybrid process. The year where we don't have to choose, where we can use wonderful digital technology, wonderful analog technology, or mix the two together. And this is something that I'm really excited about and looking to embrace in my own works. Now, I'm gonna share at the end of this video some sample images that I've made with this camera. These were all made with a very simple meniscus lens that I had made for me at f32 for this camera, not using something fancy like the Summicron 35 by any means. And they're very long handheld exposures, anywhere from 5 seconds to 20 seconds. And I'm really, in the images, going for that over-the-top, unbelievably bold color. That palette where the blues are just so deep and so rich. I'm not really obsessing about detail at any point in these images. It's more about the narrative. It's more about the overall emotional energy. If you want to know more about these new artworks, the title of this series is The Tales of the Bittersweet. On our website, Even Steve, I'll put a link in the description. I have a new catalog that we just released. It is a 44-page catalog, has some great words, great images, and really showcases what I'm doing with this camera and why I think it's important for my work. So I'll put a link to that. Thank you very much for listening. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Now go shoot some film, a digital picture or two, and have a happy, safe New Year.